The start of the Moro conflict was reignited when Muslim trainees were brutally massacred in Corregidor Island, which later be known as the Jabida Massacre. These young trainees were recruited for Marcos Special Forces for the Operation Project Merdeka, which aims to take over Sabah from Malaysia. They didn't know that they would be fighting their own brothers and sisters, and thus, when they did know, they planned to back out, which at this point they were brutally murdered. Due to these occurrences, the UP professor Nur Masuri founded the Moro Nationalist Liberation Front, or the MNLF, started the Moro conflict, and war came to Mindanao, where 100,000 casualties were found from both civilian and military. In 1976, both parties came to the negotiating table with the Organization of Islamic Conference and the Malaysian government as the mediators signed the Tripoli Agreement, the Philippine government's first action towards building peace with the Moros. What the Moro wants was a complete independence from the Philippine government and establish the Bangsamoro Republic, which Philippine government immediately declined since it would affect their sovereignty and territorial integrity. What they offered was autonomous region for the Moros, which still be ruled under the Philippine government. The agreement lacked clarity and was full of vague statements putting the Moros at disadvantage. When the implementation comes, the Moro felt tricked and betrayed because the MNLF's idea was far from what the government presented to them, thus continuing the war. Due to the failure of the agreement, the MNLF's head of foreign affairs, Salamat Hashim, so Miswar too compliant with the government that he only focuses on secular things and not the MNLF's Islamic principle. And so he decided to break away from the group and create a new group, the Moro Islamic Liberation Front, or the MILF.
In the mid 1990s, Fidel Ramos acknowledged the need for sustainable peace in Mindanao. He wants to find an effective resolution from the failed implementation of 1976 Tripoli Agreement from the Aquino administration. Ramos created the National Unification Commission and the Office of Presidential Advisor on the peace process to launch an effort in developing peace strategies that will be related to the peace process of the insurgent groups such as MILF and MNLF. These agreements include establishing the Special Zone of Peace and Development, expanding the territory of ARMM, establishing a special regional security force for the ARMM, and a lot more. The product of 4 years of negotiation during the Ramos administration, the FPA itself was a milestone in the peace process between Philippine government and Moro NSAG. However, despite of the successful implementation, it still has problems such as the MNLF blamed the national government for not generating the necessary resources to provide the population of the ARMM, leaving the region continue its struggle with extreme poverty. Despite the challenges, the FPA featured some positive gains for the Moro in terms of recognition, representation, participation, and power sharing. In terms of sustainability, the FPA may have strengthened the ARMM structural durability as well as independent economic and educational system. However, the executive order that was charged with its implementation did not have the same degree precision as the FPA itself. The FPA proved inefficient and unsustainable to their aim of resolving the Moro conflict and turned out to be far from the final peace agreement between Philippine government and Moro NSAGs.
It was in the year 2000 when the late President Joseph Estrada violated the peace negotiations with the MILF, or the Moro Islamic Liberation Front, and authorized the AFP, or the Armed Forces of the Philippines, to seize the insurgent group's camps and declaring an all-out war, thus effectively halting peace talks between the Philippine government and the MILF. On 2001, shortly after becoming president, Gloria Macapagal Arroyo attempted to correct her predecessor's mistakes and successfully resumed peace negotiations with the MILF, which eventually resulted to the forging of the 2001 Tripoli Agreement on Peace. Unlike the original Tripoli Agreement on the 1976, in which the Moros are given the autonomous authority over their administrative division without implementing guidelines on the security aspect. The negotiations are divided into three clusters: the security, humanitarian aid and development, and the ancestral domain. The first two clusters went smoothly, but the negotiations of the ancestral domain was the problem. Years would pass, and the ancestral domain won't be resolved until on July 2008. Both sides initiated the Memorandum Agreement on Ancestral Domain, or the MUAD, on July 27, 2008. The signing ceremony was scheduled for August 5th, but the Supreme Court issued a temporary restraining order to discuss further the constitutionality of the MUAD. The outcome led to the Moros to think negatively that this is another broken promise. And again, another bloodbath surge, and the MILF attacked the Christian communities, resulting to as many as 500,000 people displaced. Instead of having the intention of peace, the failure of the MUAD erupted conflict in the Mindanao. Not until on July 2009 that both sides approached each other to mingle with the peace talks once again to revive the peace that was once lost. And in 2010, the MILF was able to begin pursuing negotiations with the administration of President Benigno Aquino III.
The key part of Benigno Aquino III's campaign was the peace of MILF with the process of Moro and SAG as well as establishing the ARMM. The Philippine government developed peace-building framework hoping to avoid the outcome in the failed MOA-AD. To this end, they developed the Framework Agreement on Bangsamoro, in short FAB, in 2012, followed by the Comprehensive Agreement on Bangsamoro, in short CAB, in 2014. The FAB gave both parties year to come to an agreement on all aspects of its four annexes: transitional arrangement and modalities, revenue generation and wealth sharing, power, share, power sharing, and normalization. The historic peace plan was signed on October 2012 in Malacanang, where it was considered the most inclusive and detailed peace-building and peacekeeping agreement by the Philippine government and Moro leaders. The signing of CAB by both parties was a positive indicator of potential progress, and it's indicative of its commitment to ending the conflict and finding lasting peace. However, the Mama Sapano incident was turning point for any potential advancement under the BBL and CAB, where the PNP self-clashed with the MILF and Bangsamoro Islamic Freedom Fighters, in short, BIFF. The Mama Sapano incident complicated the peace process because of MILF's involvement in the battle, and it revived the notion that a lasting peace in southern Philippines may not be possible. The Mama Sapano incident and the heightened anti-Moro sentiment also had an influence on the next steps for the future of BBL, and it was renamed as Basic Law for Bangsamoro Autonomous Region, in short BLBAR, in order to provision and power sharing with an emphasis on Manila's greater authority. The Congress seized upon the re-emergence of negative perception of the Moro, and its provision is no longer compatible to CAB, which means that none of the peacekeeping and peacebuilding institution is envisaged have been established. However, its effects on the sustainability of peace in the Mindanao may be the lessons learned from this congressional stumbling block.
As of today, peace was established, wishing that it would still be the same for many years to come.